We begin with some brand new and unexpected developments in the strange unraveling of the Senator John Ensign sex scandal. We just learned yesterday about Senator Ensign's plan to resign from the Senate effective May 3rd. Why May 3rd? Why, after holding on for almost 2 years after his sex scandal first became public, after saying just a few weeks ago that he'd stay on till the end of his term, why did Senator Ensign suddenly announce that he will quit on some random Tuesday about 2 weeks from now? We do have an answer for that now. Stand by. The New York Times reporter who figured that out and reported on that today will explain. He'll join us here in just a moment. But for the context here, Senator Ensign's affair was with one of his staffers, a staffer who was married to one of his top Senate aides. When this affair was discovered, Senator Ensign cut both staffers loose, the staffer he was having an affair with and the staffer she was married to. And the senator's parents then cut the family a $96,000 check, a check Ensign's lawyer made sure to say was a gift from the family, because if it was considered severance pay, there is the possibility that that would be considered illegal. But the husband staffer, the man whose wife Senator Ensign had been stooping, he ultimately publicly contradicted that assertion. He said that the payment was severance. At various points over the course of Senator Ensign's scandal, investigations have been started by the FBI, by the Justice Department, by the Senate Ethics Committee. Through all of it, Senator Ensign just stuck through it, hanging out in the Senate, maintaining his innocence-ish. After the man whose wife Senator Ensign was stooping was indicted last month on charges that he illegally lobbied Senator Ensign, the senator announced that he would not seek re-election next year. He took pains to emphasize at that announcement that he wasn't resigning. He would not run again, but he wanted to be very clear he was not resigning. Why wasn't he resigning?
I didn't break any ethics rules. I didn't break any of the laws. I didn't do any of those things. So resigning would be admitting guilt.
Resigning would also be what Senator Ensign did today. He says it's effective May 3rd. May 3rd, the Tuesday after next, which is a weird specific date to pick for your resignation, May 3rd. Unless you were going to be forced to testify under oath about that $96,000 check on May 4th. And that is the bombshell from the New York Times today. Quote, Senator Ensign's resignation letter allows him to leave office just 1 day before he was going to have to answer questions under oath about whether a $96,000 payment to the family of his former lover was illegal, designed to keep the affair from becoming public. That's according to people familiar with an investigation of Mr. Ensign's activities. The Senate Ethics Committee released its own statement last night, which brought our newsroom to a standstill when read aloud by somebody who shall remain nameless, but whose initials are me. Quote, the Senate Ethics Committee has worked diligently for 22 months on this matter and will complete its work in a timely fashion. Senator Ensign has made the appropriate decision. Senator Ensign has made the appropriate decision by resigning. Does that mean they were on the verge of kicking him out of the Senate? Joining us now is Eric Lipton of the New York Times, who reported these developments today. Mr. Lipton, thank you for helping us understand this. I appreciate your time.
Good evening.
First of all, in terms of the details here, I had thought that by quitting, Senator Ensign would be escaping the Ethics Committee investigation because they only have jurisdiction over senators. So if he's not one, that would sort of be over. How is it that they can say they will be completing their work in a timely fashion now?
Well, the Senate Ethics Committee loses its capacity to discipline him once he resigns, but it still can continue its investigation, and it still can make a public statement that details its findings and any, allegations of wrongdoing. It also still has the power, as far as it understands, to make a referral if it finds grounds to the Department of Justice to recommend perhaps even a criminal investigation of wrongdoing that it may have documented through the subpoenas and interviews that it's done.
So, I mean, it has been remarkable sort of in the big picture that the only person to have gotten in trouble here is the husband of the woman who Senator Ensign slept with. But in terms of that potential referral, you're saying that the Ethics Committee, their evidence could spark potential criminal liability for the senator, even if he is out of the Senate.
It's possible if they were to make a decision to make a referral, if they found evidence that they thought represented a crime, they have the option of making a referral, providing the documentation that they've collected, and letting the Justice Department decide whether or not it wants to pursue a case.
Your reporting was sharp and to the point about the timing of Mr. Ensign's planned departure from the Senate. He says he will leave on May 3rd. He was due to testify on May 4th. Mm-hmm. Could the Ethics Committee make him testify before May 3rd? Could they move that up?
No, I don't think that's at all possible. Actually, the chairwoman, and the vice chairman of the Ethics Committee are actually in China right now as part of a congressional delegation. That's Barbara Boxer is the chairwoman. They're not even in the United States. The Senate is out of session until May 2nd, I think. So it just and those kinds of things, you have to have agreements from the various parties as to when the presentation would occur. So, it was scheduled. I have 3 sources that told me it was scheduled for May 4th. It was not an accident that he scheduled. He timed the actual departure from the Senate to be May 3rd.
In terms of the universe of types of investigations that the Senate Ethics Committee does, how big an investigation was this? And what do you know about what specifically they were looking at in terms of the senator?
This is a pretty, this is the most comprehensive, deeply digging investigation the Ethics Committee has done since the mid-1990s, when it investigated allegations of sexual misconduct by Senator Packwood, who ultimately resigned after they, in fact, recommended that he be expelled from the Senate. So this is the most important, far-reaching investigation of a sitting senator since then. And as I understand it, there's 2 things that they have really been focusing on. One is the question as to whether or not that $96,000 payment was, in fact, a severance payment and therefore represented an illegal campaign contribution by his parents to the Hamptons. And if in fact it was severance, which seems like who cares if it was severance or if it was a gift, but if in fact it was severance, there's a possibility that sworn statements that were made to the the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, when it did its investigation, that there might be some inconsistencies. That's one issue that's outstanding. A second issue as to whether or not, when Doug Hampton, who was his former administrative assistant, after he found out about the affair, there was, these are 2 former best friends, fellow, religious partners, and they raised their kids together. Once he found out that the senator was having an affair with his wife, there was a mutual decision that he could no longer remain as the administrative assistant to the senator working in the Washington office, and that he was going to leave. And Doug Hampton, in interviews that we did with him in 2009, told us that there was then a plan that was set that he would leave the office and that the senator would help him get a job, and he was going to work as a lobbyist, and that the senator told him that he could then go back to the senator's office and get his help to help his clients that the senator helped him, get. And that was an airline from Las Vegas and also an electric utility. So, in fact, Doug Hampton went and did that. He showed us his emails, which showed that he emailed the senator's office to ask for the senator's help for his clients. And those emails, which he gave to us in 2009, were the basis, in part, for the criminal charges that were filed against him in March that said that he violated a law that prohibits him from contacting the Senate for a full year after he left the office. The question the Ethics Committee has been examining is to whether or not Senator Ensign conspired, essentially, with Hampton to allow him to lobby his office during that 1-year period. Now, no senator has ever been charged for such a move. It would be, it is a question as to whether or not someone, in fact, could be charged with because the burden was on Hampton to break the revolving door restrictions. So that's the other thing they've been looking at.
New York Times reporter Eric Lipton, thank you for your reporting on this. Thanks for helping us understand it. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
One thing to keep in mind here is that, the Ethics Committee has bipartisan leadership. At this point, for Mr. Lipton's reporting and others, there does not seem to be evidence of a split between Democrats and Republicans on the Senate Ethics Committee on this. This does not seem to be a partisan thing. This seems to be a John Ensign's gotta go thing.